In the book Dopamine Nation, Dr. Anna Lempke tells us why people are getting so messed up in the world today. It all has to do with our relationship with dopamine. Dopamine is the reward chemical in our mind that gives us pleasure, but it's also the same chemical that gives us motivation towards big goals. Dopamine basically is the fuel that gives you the motivation to go out and seek big rewards or achieve goals, but it's also the experience you get when you get a reward. And basically, this is what's going on in the world today, is the world that we live in is so instant gratification, so quick release, so easy, that we've created a bad relationship with motivation and with pleasure and rewards. Often when people wake up, the first thing they do is they start checking their social media, and that gives them an immediate dopamine hit. They start watching YouTube videos. They start doing anything to get that quick dopamine hit. They wake up and then they start consuming chemicals that give them stimulants, or they eat food that is high in sugar or in fat. When you give yourself rewards without earning those rewards, without actually having to have worked and done it. As an example, if you go to the gym and work really hard, you can have endorphins and you can have dopamine. You can get feeling good because you earned it, and you can feel confidence. But if you just give yourself instant rewards, instant gratification without having done anything, then you train yourself to think that you can have rewards without earning it. And that really messes up your motivation. It messes up your confidence. So in this video, I'm going to share with you a morning routine that you can apply so that you can constantly master your dopamine. You can master your energy. You can master your emotions. You can master your motivation so that you can become increasingly motivated, increasingly successful, have bigger and longer term goals, and not get so messed up along the way. So I'm Dr. Benjamin Hardy, by the way, author of Be Your Future Self Now. Down below, you can go to futureself.com and get free resources on this book. This book will change your life. With that said, let me go ahead and jump into this morning routine. Before I jump into the specifics of the morning routine, I want to share with you a few psychological principles. One is that if you use motivation as the fuel to achieve big goals, you get a lot of benefits. First off, you get better and better at earning progress. You have the joy of the pursuit, as they would say. It's the pursuit that gives you fuel. When you're someone who starts to get your dopamine right, then you start wanting to wake up and start achieving goals, start making progress towards your goals. And as you work to make progress, not only do you see progress, which is a reward in and of itself, but then you get confidence, because confidence comes from making progress. Confidence comes by having actually completed something, by having made progress. When you look back at a good workout or having actually made progress on your goals, you can look back on that and see massive confidence. There's another concept in psychology, actually. It's called identity capital. And your identity capital is very similar to your confidence. When you accomplish a goal, for example, if I write a book, I now have the identity capital of someone who's written a book, because I can look back and see that I've done it. And so if you wake up and you start making progress towards your goals, if you have a day well spent, a day well lived, you put the important before the urgent. And by the way, we live in a world of seeking urgent first. Urgent could be watching the mainstream news, watching the what's hot, getting on social media. If you're always seeking what's urgent, you're never doing what's important. And so your dopamine gets all out of whack. And if you're always seeking the instant gratification, the immediate things, then what happens is you start creating a lower and lower baseline, because every time you use up your dopamine on an instant gratification, whether it's unhealthy food, whether it's just scrolling social media mindlessly, you're basically burning your dopamine tank down, and you're creating a lower and lower baseline that you're basically setting yourself up for disaster. And so if your dopamine gets all out of whack because you're just constantly seeking short-term rewards, this is basically addiction. Then what happens is if you're not given those instant rewards, then because your baseline is so low, you're now depressed. And so not only have you destroyed motivation, but you've also created a state where you're now depressed unless you are seeking higher and higher dosages of instant, fake, cheap dopamine. So there's cheap dopamine, and then there's genuine dopamine. And the genuine dopamine is the fuel to help you achieve massive goals, which then leads to confidence and increased identity capital. As you boost your identity capital by achieving bigger and bigger goals on a daily basis, you then see yourself as the kind of person who can achieve bigger goals. James Clear, the author of Atomic Habits, said that every behavior you do casts a vote for the kind of person you think you are. So as you make progress towards goals, not only do you have the reward of having achieved progress, you have the confidence and the identity capital. I'm going to connect this really quickly, lastly, to research on future self, and then I'm going to give you some of the mechanics of a morning routine that you can use so that you can increasingly have insane motivation, positive emotions, and an amazing relationship with your own self, so that you're raising that baseline of success rather than lowering it. So what the research on future self shows is that as people, most people are not connected with their long-term future self. You need to have a connection and a relationship and a clear vision of your long-term future self if you want to have quality behavior in the present. This is what Dr. Hal Hershfield has found, is that as a person, and there's a lot of research on this in psychology, as people, who we are and what we're doing is based on our view of and our commitment to our future self. Most people's future self is not very far out. Most people are living day to day, week to week, month to month. There's a great quote in the book, The 50th Law by Robert Greene and 50 Cent. And they say, by our nature as rational, conscious creatures, we cannot help but think of the future. But most people out of fear, and I'll also say by most people out of addiction, they limit their view of the future to just a few days ahead, maybe the week ahead, maybe a vague plan for the months. But we're generally dealing with so many immediate battles or so many short-term dopamine hits that we're not lifting our gaze. And so they say in the book, it is a law of power that the further and deeper we contemplate the future, the more we can shape it to our desires. Most people are dealing with a near immediate future self. Their future self isn't very far out. Instead, they're just dealing with getting to social media, getting to the weekend, getting to the end of the day, paying the bills. And that's actually what Dr. Hal Hershfield has found. He said it's really hard for people to connect to their long-term future self because the pull of the present is too powerful. The rewards of the present are immediate, whereas if you're going to start investing in your bigger term future self, such as getting really in shape, developing skills, building a retirement nest egg, those things, the reward is out there. Whereas if you just seek short-term cheap dopamine, you can have the reward right now, but you're left with a really crappy future self. And that's what most people's dilemma is because they're not connected to a long-term future self, they're seeking short-term dopamine hits, which is ultimately costing their long-term future self massively. There's actually a TED Talk called The Battle Between Your Present and Your Future Self. And in that, the psychologist who gave that talk talks about how it's an unfair battle between the present and the future self because the future self is not present, whereas the present self can pick up a donut and start eating it and get the rewards. And so it's just an unfair advantage to the present self if you're not connected and committed to your future self. However, if you get clear and committed to your future self, and if you start making progress towards your goals and start building massive confidence and massive momentum, then your future self can drive the ship and you can start having a bigger and bigger vision for your future self. And as you start having a bigger vision for your future self, your present life gets better and better. There's actually a great quote on this from Dan Sullivan. He said, the only way to make your present better is by making your future bigger. So you want to have a massive vision of your future self that's driving everything you do here and now. And again, this connects right back to the research on future self by Dr. Hal Hershfield. He talks about how the clearer and more committed you get to your future self, the better decisions you make in the present. You start investing towards retirement and you stop spending so much on junk. You start eating better. You stop engaging in wasteful or destructive behaviors and habits. You can't really improve your behavior in the present unless you improve your vision of your future, because without having a purpose or a reason to improve your behavior, you won't do it. That's the willpower approach to change. You need a why before you focus on the how, and the why is your vision for your future self and what you're striving to accomplish. This morning routine is going to help you increasingly build a vision towards your future self and start making the right tangible progress towards that. So when you wake up, how you start something often shapes the momentum of it. And most people, they start their day in a negative way. They start immediately scrolling. In fact, there's a lot of research that shows that within 5 to 10 minutes, people are already reactively scrolling through either email, social media, or already watching dopamine inducing media. And so immediately people start rewarding themselves or draining their dopamine in a negative way. They're immediately rewarding themselves with cheap negative dopamine and creating immediate essentially rewards before they've even done anything. Rather than immediately rewarding yourself, you want to get up and start building towards your future self. You want to start making progress. You want a routine that gets you in flow. You want to start getting short wins. There's actually a great book called Make Your Bed that talks about how if you just make your bed first thing in the morning, you've already started to build wins. You've already started to build momentum and progress in the right way. I would also argue you want to have clear goals that were set the night before. Right before you go to bed, you want to be clear on what your purpose is for tomorrow, so that when you wake up the next day, you already have a purpose. You're already clear on what you're trying to accomplish. And you should have no more than 3 goals to accomplish each day. There's a great book called Good to Great by Jim Collins. He said, if you have more than 3 priorities, you have none. And I would argue that's true as well on a daily basis. Not only do you want 3 overarching clear priorities towards your future self, but on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, you don't want 10 items on your to-do list. That creates too much decision fatigue. On your daily to-do list, you don't want 10 things. Maybe you want 2 or 3 max. Because according to the 80-20 rule, 80% of your results comes from 20% of what you do. And most people are busy but not productive. And so rather than trying to accomplish 10 things, you really just want to accomplish maybe 2 or 3, the most important things that have the highest leverage, the highest impact. What are the most important things you could accomplish today that would make the biggest impact? So have no more than 3 items on your to-do list when you wake up so that you can wake up with a purpose. And these are the 80-20. These are the few things that if you accomplish will give you a massive reward. Now, there's another principle that you want to apply, and that's the idea that your input shapes your outlook. Rather than consuming mindless media, which is basically just candy, it's like living on a candy diet. Most people are shaping their worldview and their motivation with a junk diet, a junk media diet. You want to consume only high quality information, quality over quantity. So reading good books, spiritual books, scriptures, history, whatever. You want to fill your mind with quality that is stimulating in a challenging way, that forces you to think, maybe take notes. Rather than just being fed trash media, you actually want to be consuming challenging media, education over entertainment. Using the 80-20 rule as well. You want to have 80% of the input that you have be educational, whereas 20% is entertainment. Certainly it's good to have entertainment. It's good to relax, recover, but that should come after you actually have built something, you've worked, you've actually learned. You reward yourself after the work is a principle that we all learn growing up, but perhaps as adults, we stop applying that principle. So you wake up with a plan, no more than 2 or 3 items on the to-do list, and you get moving. I would say that key aspects of a morning routine are get some small wins so that you're generating momentum, make progress towards your big picture vision. So whatever that is for you, whatever your future self is. For me, my future self is a writer. I've got 6 kids, and so I'm working towards my family. I've got very clear goals, and I'm making progress towards those goals in the morning when my mind is fresh. There's a lot of research that shows that your brain is most creative first thing in the morning. Another really brilliant morning activity is simply journaling. Journaling first thing in the morning. Josh Waitzkin, who's the author of The Art of Learning, talks a lot about this. When you first wake up in the morning, your subconscious has been doing so many amazing things. It's been forming memories, but it's also been learning and working out your problems, especially if you went to bed the night before visualizing your problems. There's a great quote from Thomas Edison. He said, never go to bed without a request to your subconscious. And so if you go to bed thinking about your vision, visualizing your goals, and then go to bed, your subconscious will have actually probably worked out a lot of that. And so when you pop into your journal and your brain's already immediately creative, and I would actually challenge you to journal in a different environment. I actually like getting into my car, driving, after I've hydrated, drink a ton of water, and journaling in my car because it's quiet. You can then write about your goals or write about the things you're trying to accomplish. I often will write about the books I'm writing, and it's amazing how many insights that I get because my mind is so fresh and because my subconscious has just worked it out. If you wake up and immediately start inputting, you start putting new information in your brain, then you lose access to what your subconscious did that not all night. But if instead of inputting, you go straight to output, start dumping into your journal your thoughts, then you can start accessing the gold mine of your subconscious. Wake up with a plan. Give yourself space to journal and reflect, but also visualize and write about your goals. I would also say journal with gratitude journal. So now you're boosting all of the right neurochemicals, I could say, gratitude, and then ultimately you make progress towards your goals. You start making progress towards your goals, you start moving forward. This is a morning routine that if you do, you can start making massive progress towards your future self. I love the quote that you make or break your life before 8 a.m. I applied these principles to become a professional author while I was a foster parent of 3 kids and completing a PhD program. What I would do is I would wake up at 5 a.m. I would go to the gym at Clemson University. That's where I was doing my PhD. The gym didn't open until 5:30. And so once I got to the gym, I would write in my journal for about 15 minutes. I'd write about my goals. I'd write about the problems I'm trying to solve. I'd write about the articles that I was going to write because I was writing a lot of blog posts. And it's amazing how much insight and inspiration I got. And then I'd go work out for about 45 minutes, and then I'd go and write blog posts. And then I'd have my first class at like 8 a.m., but I consistently published. I love the quote, better prolific than perfect. I was publishing over a couple of years. I published hundreds of blog posts, and those blog posts got viewed by over 100 million people, which led me to becoming a professional author as a PhD student because I used my morning routine, and because I was clear and connected on my future self, and because rather than waking up and dipping into short-term dopamine, I used my dopamine as fuel and motivation towards my future self. And as you make progress towards your future self, then you start to build massive confidence, identity capital, and Confidence actually fuels more motivation. So as you build more confidence, you actually have a higher well or a bigger source of quality dopamine to use towards bigger and more healthy, more challenging, more epic goals. So you absolutely can use a morning routine to create a healthy relationship with dopamine, where you use dopamine, it doesn't use you. You create a higher and higher baseline or a bigger well of motivational resources you can use to create bigger goals, rather than basically injecting yourself with fake dopamine and setting yourself up for failure, setting your future self up for failure. There's nothing worse than living a life of regret. And if you get older and older and you basically are becoming the worst version of yourself, or you're not living your dreams, and you look back on regret, you see all the time you wasted basically just consuming junk. And consumption leads to more consumption. If you consume short-term rewards, you'll need more and more dosages of it because the reward is so short-term. Whereas if you're actually using your dopamine to achieve massive goals, you actually get the long-term benefits of achievement, because you feel great about achieving massive results. You feel good to accomplish, whereas you don't feel good if you're constantly needing to consume shorter and shorter term dopamine, and then ultimately setting up your future self for disaster, putting your future self in debt. I look at it as it's the difference between investing in your future self or costing your future self. You could seek short-term dopamine, which ultimately costs your future self, making your future self fatter or more in debt in all ways, emotionally, financially, or you can invest in your future self and make your future self more and more wealthy, successful, healthy, and happy. And as you invest in your future self, your life gets better and better. So I challenge you to use your morning routines to make your future self bigger, to invest in your future self, and ultimately to create a powerful, epic relationship with dopamine. Because as you do, you'll have more motivation, more confidence, more identity capital. Your past will get better, your future will get bigger, and your present will be powerful. You'll live better and better days. It's not about working harder. It's about having the fuel, the energy, the motivation to be in flow and to succeed. People who wake up early have a lot of motivation. If you wake up early, no matter how successful you are, you're proving to yourself that your day matters. I've found this time and again. When I wake up at 5 or 6 in the morning, and usually honestly closer to 5, I have better energy throughout the whole day. If you wake up early, you're proving to yourself that you have a lot of good things you want to do in your life. Then the key aspect of the morning routine is really twofold. One is to get yourself into a high-level peak state. In the book, The Art of Learning, Joshua Waitzkin talks about the importance of pre-performance routines. Highest performers, people who are at the top 1% of 1% in their craft, they actually have a pre-performance routine. If you think about people like Steph Curry has a warm-up before he plays basketball every single time. He does that warm-up not only to get himself in sync, but also to get himself to that mindset. Michael Phelps is another person. Michael Phelps had a pre-performance routine before he swam every time. All top performers know that what they do first determines how they actually perform. And so a key aspect of the morning routine is simply to put yourself into that state of mind so that when you perform your most important task, you're doing it from the frame of mind of your future self. You're being your future self now. You're committed, you're in flow, you're fully there. This is one of the reasons why you really don't want to just wake up and just mindlessly scroll. You don't want to open your phone and open your email, because you're sending in messages that are going to send your brain in unpredictable directions. If you're going for impact, you want to be proactive, not reactive. And this connects with all the research on dopamine. If you are seeking short-term dopamine, you're going to need more and more and more of it throughout the day just to keep yourself at baseline. And ultimately, that's a lot of negative momentum. That's the present self winning the battle between the future self. So you ultimately want to wake up, and rather than sending your brain in random directions through random inputs, you want to get yourself into a pre-performance flow state. Journaling is a great way of doing that. Josh Waitzkin talks about waking up in the morning and tapping into all of the subconscious breakthroughs his brain had when he was sleeping. He calls that crystallized intelligence. And so getting into a new environment, it's key to get out of your bedroom, get into a new environment, super hydrate yourself, drink a lot of water, pull out your journal. And the key is that you want to get to your first activity quick. You want to wake up and get moving. You can shower if you want. You can go to the gym if you want. I find though, opening your journal and just fleshing out your future self, being grateful, getting yourself into the right frame of mind, strategizing, writing about your future self, and then whatever else you want to do in your pre-performance routine before you do your most important task. Generally for me, it's about waking up, hydrating, writing in my journal, going to the gym for like 30 minutes, hardcore workout, and then coming with pure focus and pure flow into my most important activity. For me, whether that's filming a video or writing my book, I've now put myself into a peak state. I'm in flow. I'm feeling amazing. I'm focused. And now I can perform that deep work for 60 to 90 minutes, or even 60 to 120 minutes, just totally absorbed, totally committed. And one thing that's amazing is that as you get better and better at putting yourself into that peak state and then performing the most important task, and this is kind of comparing what's important versus what's urgent. Most people are on the hamster wheel because they just wake up, they start doing short-term dopamine, which puts them on a really negative momentum, negative trajectory for the day, where they need more and more basically short-term dopamine hits to just keep themselves going rather than making progress towards their future self. You can use dopamine as fuel towards big goals, or you can use dopamine to pretty much numb yourself from the distractions of life. But if you consistently accomplish the most important thing first, before the busyness of the day, before your meetings, before you get on and check social media, or even before you reward yourself with just enjoyment, such as watching a YouTube video or whatever it is you do, if you consistently accomplish the most important thing first, and you do that, a few things will happen. Number one, you will have insane confidence. Confidence is the byproduct of past performance. And you'll also have a concept called identity capital. Identity capital is what happens when you look back and you can actually see the things you've accomplished. You start to build that identity capital, you start to build confidence, and you have massive momentum. Also, it's a lot easier to just be in flow and be present the rest of the day because you've already generated so much of the positive momentum. You then have a desire to just continue to do the right thing the rest of the day. And so it's a lot easier to be present with your loved ones. It's a lot easier to be discerning of what to do with your time rather than feeling like you need to catch up. It's that idea that if you lose that hour in the morning, you'll spend the rest of the day trying to get it. If you don't use that first hour well, then you're always going to have this gnawing cognitive dissonance where you're feeling like you're just in a state of regret, which leads you to never really being present in your work. And then when you go home, you feel like kind of an imposter or a fraud, and you're never really where you want to be. And what happens when you're spending a lot of your time in paralysis by analysis or thinking or distraction is you age yourself very quickly. If you're not just being present, being in flow, being focused, moving forward, you age yourself because you're overly thinking, you're drooping yourself down in thoughts. Thinking is very important when structured. If you give yourself structured thinking, you can really solve a problem, such as when you're journaling, or thinking in more of a free flow way. Like, for example, if you're traveling or in the shower, that kind of wandering thinking can lead to great thoughts. But just ruminating because you're not being who you want to be, ruminating because of frustration or ruminating because of regret ages you like crazy. And I've seen this. I've seen people literally go gray and start to become wrinkly because they're not being in alignment with who they know they could be or want to be. And so all of that ruminating wears them down. It ages them very quickly. And so you can avoid that. You can stay young by making progress in the morning. And if you use those first few hours to get into a flow state and then ultimately to perform the most important work, you'll become very successful at what you do over time. It doesn't take more than 3 to 5 years of consistent, deep work, deliberate practice, use of morning routine for you to change your life. I believe if anyone who's watching this does this and they have a clear vision of their future self and then they commit to that vision of their future self, and then every morning they put the important before the urgent, they use that pre-performance time to get in flow, get to the right space mentally, and then do deep work, you could change your life. I know it because this is exactly what I did. When I was a PhD student at Clemson University, I had classes. I was a PhD student. My wife and I had 3 foster kids, but I woke up at 5 a.m. I went to the gym. The gym opened at 5:30. Before going into the gym, I would journal about my future self, about my goals, about what I thought I should do. When you're journaling in the morning and just reflecting, and if you want, you can include prayer and meditation into this. I would pray and ask God to inspire my thoughts. Then while journaling, a lot of interesting things would come to my mind that then I would journal on. And then I would go to the gym, work out, get really my blood flowing, my endorphins going, and then I would ultimately write blog posts. That's what I was doing at that point in time. That was the singularity using constraint theory. That was the one thing that in that point in time, I knew that if I got 10 times better at that, then I could 10 times my life, which I did. If you focus and if you actually do the most important thing first, then it's really easy to create massive results. And then once you change your life, then your future self's a different person, then your dreams change. And so then you've got to find the one thing that matters most then, and you keep putting the important before the urgent. And this is just a beautiful way to live your life, a beautiful way to continuously jump, evolve, and advance so that your future is always bigger than your present. Life is busy, and if you do not learn how to control it, it will pass you by. There's a quote from Meredith Willson. She said, "If you wait for too many tomorrows, you will find you have nothing but a lot of empty yesterdays." That's how most people's life is, because they don't learn how to use their morning hours. If you do not learn how to use your morning hours before 8 a.m., you have a lot of empty yesterdays. Because for most people, when it gets to 8 a.m. and beyond, life gets busy. It could be getting to work. It could be taking the kids to school. It could be a number of things. Email takes over. And so what you do before 8 a.m. in large part determines your success in life. What happens before 8 a.m. is based on what you did the night before. After 8 p.m. at night, you should shut down, turn off your phone, put on airplane mode, plan your big 3 for the next morning. According to Brian Tracy in the book Eat the Frog, you want to eat the frog in the morning. Do the worst first. And what eat the frog actually means is that you take your most important activity, what's important, not urgent, and you get it done in the morning before the busyness of the day. Before 8 a.m., you should not take your phone off airplane mode. You shouldn't input and distract yourself. Instead, you want to get in your journal, write about what you're grateful for, think about your future self, think about what you want to accomplish that day, and then get to action on your frogs, which is your future self, which is you taking action on the most important things. And if you consistently eat the frog before 8 a.m., if you consistently accomplish 1 to 3 major outcomes towards your future self before 8 a.m., your life will change. Your life will completely change. So what you do before 8 a.m. shapes and determines the rest of your day. If you accomplish what's important before what's urgent, then eventually you'll stop paying much attention to what's urgent. Most people, their whole life is based on what's urgent. They're just reactive to situations. They're reactive to their job. And so they have dreams. They've got goals, but they can never get forward because they're just on the hamster wheel. There's actually a concept in psychology called the hedonic treadmill. And what the hedonic treadmill means is you're always chasing the next best thing. And it's like you're running, but you're always just staying at the same place. And that's how most people's lives are. They're very busy, but they're not productive. In order to be productive, you've got to let go of what's busy. You've got to let go of what's urgent. You've got to focus exclusively on what's important. Of course, you've got to pay the bills. Of course, you've got to do what's urgent, but you purposefully procrastinate those things. You push those things off because you know they'll get done. It's a forcing function. Anything that must get done will get done. Necessity is the mother of invention. But the things that aren't getting done are the things that are important, the things that are towards your future self, the dreams that you have that you're probably not doing. So when it comes to having an optimal morning routine, first off, obviously, that starts the night before. Turn your airplane mode off by 8 p.m., depending on when you go to bed. Give yourself at least 30 to 90 minutes, no phone before bed. In your journal, write about what you're grateful for. Write your big 3 for the next day. Have no more than 3 key objectives for the next day. As Jim Collins said, if you've got more than 3 priorities, you've got none. The 80-20 rule says that 80% of your results comes from 20% of what you do. So you don't want 10 items on your to-do list because 8 of those, 7 or 8 of those are just busyness distraction. Focus on the 1, 2, or 3 that are going to make the biggest impact. Get to bed, get at least 7 hours of sleep. If you write the things you're grateful for at night, so if you turn your phone on airplane mode and don't look at it, if you just zone down, if you write about what you're grateful for, and if you write your big 3 at night, and then just enjoy your family or enjoy some hobby, you will sleep amazingly well. Wake up with a purpose. When your alarm goes off or when you just wake up, you'll know the first thing you want to do because you've already got that plan in place. Never start a day unless it's finished on paper. I think Jim Rohn said that. And so when your alarm goes off or whenever you wake up, you know the first thing you want to do because you've got your big 3 written down. Therefore, you can wake up with a purpose and you can start taking action. One of the reasons that people hit the snooze button, first off, because they got crappy sleep. Second off, because they don't know the first thing they want to do. They're avoiding the day. In motivation, there's a couple forms of motivation, but one is push and one is pull. If you have to push yourself to get out of bed, that's a willpower way of living. And you don't want to live your life on a willpower approach because willpower burns out fast. You want to be pulled, which means you're intrinsically motivated and you're excited about what you're doing. You want to be pulled out of bed. You want to be super excited towards working on your future self, towards eating those frogs in the morning. And so if you've got those 3 things written down, and then you can just wake up and start taking action, then you can wake up with a purpose. You already know what you're going to do. One of the things that Michael Jordan said is, once I made a decision, I never thought about it again. The opposite of making a decision is what's called decision fatigue in psychology. Decision fatigue means you don't necessarily know what you want to do. And so if you haven't made a plan the night before, if you haven't, that's why it says never start your day unless it's finished on paper. If your day's not finished on paper and if you don't know what you want to do, Then you've got to like weigh in your mind options. Well, what should I do? Should I do this? Should I do that? Should I do this? That's decision fatigue. Going back and forth in your mind, that burns out your willpower, exhausts you, and ultimately, think about it. If your alarm goes off and then you don't know what you want to do, you haven't made the plan, you haven't finished your day on paper, and then you're sitting there exhausted in bed and you're weighing back and forth, what should I do? That's first off a really terrible situation to put yourself in. That's a horrible situation and a horrible state of mind to make a decision. You're probably not going to make a good decision in that state. And you're going to go back and forth. What should I do? Should I get up and work on that book, or should I work on that project? Or should I just lay here in bed and just hit the snooze button and get an extra 15 minutes of sleep? Situations beat undecided people. That's a bad situation to try to make a decision in. Willpower is going to fail you 9 times out of 10. That's why you want to have made the decision the night before, so that when you wake up, the decision's already made. You don't have to deal with decision fatigue. Again, the opposite of decision fatigue is decision. And so in order to eliminate decision fatigue and in order to stop relying on willpower, you just make a decision. And you can also design your environment to make it easy. One of the ways to design your environment, put your alarm clock on the opposite side of the room so that when it goes off, you've got to go get it. And right there, when you get up out of bed to turn off your alarm clock, your journal is sitting right there with your big 3. And also you got a huge cup of water sitting right there so you can drink it and hydrate. You've designed the situation so that success is inevitable. That's what you want to do, is you want to make success go from unlikely to likely to inevitable. And success becomes inevitable when you design the situation so that success is the automatic response. You've made a decision and you've designed the environment around that decision so that it's like Michael Jordan. Once you make a decision, you never have to think about it again. Another cool concept around this is from B.J. Fogg, the Stanford psychologist who wrote the book Tiny Habits. He says design beats willpower. When it comes to designing behavior and designing outcomes, you want to design the environment around the behaviors that you want. You want to design the situation so that flow is easy, so that the most easy and obvious behaviors are the ones you want to make. Most people, the most easy and obvious behaviors are the ones they don't want. They've got all their distractions on their phone, all their apps. And so the most easy behaviors are the self-sabotage behaviors. You want to do the opposite with your environment. You want to design your environment so that the most easy, obvious behaviors are the ones towards your future self. So you've slept around 8 hours. You wake up with a purpose with your big 3. You've designed your environment so it's easy. You then start your day with gratitude, because gratitude unleashes all sorts of positive emotions. It helps you see the world from a positive place. It releases endorphins, makes you happy. Then you write down for 5 to 15 minutes about your future self. This is just dumping out whatever your brain was working on while you were asleep. As Thomas Edison said, never go to bed without a request to your subconscious. Well, the night before, when you were writing about gratitude and when you were writing about your big 3, that was you making a request to your subconscious. Your brain was focusing on it, processing it. And then when you wake up, you just journal 5 to 15 minutes about your future self, about what you're trying to accomplish, and watch. You're going to get so much creative inspiration. Keep your phone on airplane mode until you've done your morning routine and until you've finished at least 60 to 90 minutes of your most important work, which is eating the frog. Don't tap into your phone, unless you're listening to like an audiobook or something that's active learning. And by the way, there's 2 forms of learning. There's approach-focused learning, which is where you're actively learning something specific that's helping you to accomplish a near-term goal, or there's avoid learning, where you're just learning, getting information. You could hop on YouTube and get information about a million topics that are irrelevant to you, to the current situation. Approach-focused learning means you are approaching and focusing on the things that you can immediately apply. And so you wake up, you do your morning journaling, and then you jump into your first frog, whatever that is. 60 to 90 minutes of focused work on whatever it may be. The most important thing you can do. Always put the important before the urgent. If you put the important before the urgent consistently, you will live a better and better life. And if you do all this before 8 a.m., you will increasingly have better days. You'll wake up energized, excited. You can accomplish more by 8 a.m. than most people accomplish in weeks or years that is relevant to your future self, because most people, they've got a lot of empty yesterdays. They wake up and then they're just on the treadmill. And they're taking a lot of action, but they're busy, not productive. But if you wake up, get yourself into a peak state, which is where you're operating at a high level, you're in a flow state, and then you do your frog in a peak state, whatever that is. For me, for years, that was writing blog posts. I would wake up, I'd write in my journal, I'd go into the gym, I'd hit it hard, and then I'd go and write an article for like 60 to 90 minutes and publish it. Did that for 3 years, and it led me to becoming a professional writer and having a 7-figure business as a graduate student. Right now, I'm working on great things towards my future self. And so you want to eat those frogs in the morning. You want to get yourself into a peak state. And then from there, the rest of the day really doesn't matter, because you've already put the important before the urgent. Then you can deal with the urgent stuff. And then you do it the same thing the next night. You turn off at 8 p.m. or whatever time you want, 60 to 90 minutes before you go to bed. Put your phone in airplane mode, slow things down, be present in your environment, write what you're grateful for, write your big 3 for the next day. If you got an accountability partner, which I recommend you do, you text your accountability partner the big 3 that you're going to do the next day. Then you just enjoy yourself and go to bed and get some absolutely amazing sleep and do it the next day in whatever form you want. Another thing that obviously would be great in your morning routines if you want, although there's research that shows that fitness in the afternoon is often more effective, but do your fitness whenever you want to. Exercise first thing in the morning can be really powerful. High intensity exercise really gets your endorphins going and stuff, and there's a lot of research that shows that, like, for example, students who do like 20 minutes of high intensity exercise right before taking a test, they often do better because their brains are just operating really high. So sometimes doing high intensity workout right before you jump into your 60 to 90 minutes is good, or you just jump into your 60 to 90 minutes and exercise after, or you exercise in the afternoon. But definitely have exercise in your day, and definitely take at least 60 minutes sometime in your day to just learn something. That's active approach focused learning, not avoid learning. It's easy to be caught in the trap of feeling like you're being productive because you're learning something, whether that's on YouTube or whether that's on a book or a podcast, when it's not learning you're actively applying. Approach focused learning means you're actually learning the thing you need to do right now to take the next step action. You're actually learning stuff that's relevant to what your current and near-term goals are. You want to be an active learner, not an avoid learner. And so that is a morning routine that if you apply on a consistent basis, you will actively become your future self. Right now, this is your current baseline, your current level, your current average, your current normal. You have a normal level of baseline, an average set of behaviors and outcomes and experiences, and your future self is way up here. And if on a regular basis, every morning, you're taking action towards your future self, then you're slowly progressing your baseline up, and you're creating a new normal all the time. And that's how the compound effect happens. That's how the tortoise beats the hare, is because every single day you're taking huge action towards your future self. And you do that for a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, the compound effect's nuts. It's not hard to become a millionaire. It's not hard to start businesses or become amazing at what you do if you just consistently do this. Then it just changes your orientation towards time. Because you're putting the important before the urgent, you stop dealing with the urgencies. You stop being caught up in the busyness of low level activities, and you only focus on those things which are truly important. You can say no to a lot of things, even great things, because you get increasingly clear and discerning on what matters to you. So that's my challenge to you. After 8 p.m. or between 60 and 90 minutes before bed, turn off your phone, airplane mode it, just zone in, be present in your environment. At some point, write 3 things you're grateful for, write your next big 3. Text those big 3 to an accountability partner in bullet points. It should take less than 60 seconds. Wake up with a purpose. Design the environment so that it's easy. Then from there, write in your journal for 5 to 15 minutes. Start with gratitude, and then just write whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. Your brain and your subconscious will be on fire. And then if you want, do 15 to 20 minutes of high intensity fitness and get into your frogs. 60 to 90 minutes of flow-based work on your most important goal or objective. If you trying to start a business, if you're designing a product, if you're writing an article, if you're filming videos, if you're writing books, do that. Put the important before the urgent, and then you will have actually lived your life. If you're not putting the important before the urgent, you're not living your life, you're on the hamster wheel. And it's exhausting, and it burns you out because you're spending more and more energy staying in the same place. You have a baseline right here. Your future self is up here. Every day you take action towards your future self, you're just upgrading that baseline. You're upgrading your standards for yourself. You're upgrading the person you are. The most successful and the most creative people in the world actually work less than the average person. That may be a bold claim, but in order to actually make more money and accomplish more, you have to work less, but you have to work better. Now, there are ways to do this, and your brain is literally designed to do it, and your body is designed to do it, and you can optimize your time, but you need to learn the principles. So in this video, I'm going to share with you a morning routine, but also just a lifestyle approach that can save you at least 20 hours a week. If you apply this morning routine and this exercise, not only will you get way more focused flow work done, you'll be able to, if you wanted to, become a millionaire in the next few years. You could become a professional writer. You could start a very successful business, but you could also work way less than you used to. You can work way less than the average person. I actually applied this morning routine while I was doing a PhD program to become a professional writer. I applied this morning routine for 3 years. I wrote hundreds of blog posts. They were read over 100 million times. I became a professional author. And since then, I've been able to write multiple books while doing a PhD program and while being a foster parent of 3 kids and ultimately adopting those 3 kids. I now have 6 kids as a 32-year-old millennial, and I work way less than the average person because of this morning routine. And so I'm going to share my screen. I've written this as an article. This article has been read over 10 million times. I'm going to break down the science and the specifics for you, because once you understand how this works, not only will you have way more flow in your life, not only will you be able to accomplish way more, you're going to have way more focused work, but you're also going to have way more play, way more time outside of work, way more recovery. This is where the science of high performance has gone. A lot of it's focused on recovery. If you think about people like LeBron James, basketball players, it's all focused on recovery and super focused flow-based workouts. They call it deliberate practice in psychology. Deliberate practice is how you become an expert at something. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. So this article, again, is called "This Morning Routine Will Save You 20 Plus Hours a Week." And by the way, I start this article by explaining that the traditional 9-to-5 workday is poorly structured. The reason the 9-to-5 workday was established is because back in like the Industrial Revolution, the early 1900s, late 1800s, early 1900s, that's when America became revolutionized. And that's when we developed the industrial model for work. That's what the public education system is based on. That's what the old work model was based on, where everyone worked in a factory. You went through public education system to become a factory worker, an obedient, compliant factory worker, and all of your work was mostly physical menial labor, where you're putting parts in places here. Well, we don't live in that world anymore. We've went from the Industrial Revolution to the information and the technology revolution. We now live in a global technology and information world where most people now are beginning to work from home, especially due to the pandemic. This is even more true now. You can work from home, you control your own schedule, and ultimately it's not based on how many hours you work, it's based on the results you produce. If you can produce the results, whatever it is that you need to do, in 3 hours, then why do you need to work between 9 and 5? The goal is not to work. Actually, Dan Sullivan, the founder of Strategic Coach, calls this 2 economies. There's 2 economies in the world. One is the results economy, where you get paid for the results you produce. And the other is the time and effort economy, where you're paid for the amount of time and effort you put into something. You're much better to be in the results economy, where you create results in the most effective way possible. And so that's what this morning routine is about. And I submit that if you apply these principles, you can produce results 10 times faster and 10 times better than you used to. Because most people who work in the time and effort economy, where they're working long hours, first off, they're required to take more and more stimulants every single day because, and there's a lot of research on this as well, caffeine addiction is based on the 9-to-5 work model. It's not effective to work that many hours, especially when we're using our brain so much now. The brain is an organ that takes up 20% of the body's energy, even though it only weighs like 2-3 pounds. Mental work is more taxing than physical work. And if you're doing hard mental labor, hard mental work, complex decision-making, it's exhausting. If you're in a flow state and if you're working at the most ideal time, when your brain is most suited, when you have the most willpower, when you have the most energy, and if you're in a flow state, meaning you're not distracted, you should be able to work for between 2 and 5 hours pretty straight. You could take a few mental breaks, go for a walk, do some jumping jacks, drink some water, but you could be able to work for 2 to 5 hours straight in flow without any distractions. Don't check Facebook, don't check your email. When you're taking those 2 to 5 minute breaks, go for a walk. Do something that's not plugging yourself into the matrix where then you move your brain into a million different directions. The key to being in flow is to focus on one thing at a time, one outcome at a time. So if you're working on, let's just say, writing an article or doing a project, that's the only outcome you're trying to produce. You may take some breaks from it for a second, but you're not opening up your email. You're not sending your brain in different directions, because the more directions your brain's going, the less flow you can be in. So here it is. Really, it comes down to this. So this is the myth of the 8-hour workday. A lot of the countries in the world, they don't actually work 8 hours a day. For example, Luxembourg, these people work 30 hours per week, 6 hours per day, sometimes 5 hours. But they make more money on average than those working longer hours. So really the goal is quality over quantity. The goal is that you actually spend your time doing what you were supposed to do. That requires that you actually have clear goals and you spend time doing what Brian Tracy calls eating the frog. Eating the frog means you do the worst first. Stephen Covey called this putting first things first, putting the important before the urgent. So if you wake up with clear goals, you're clear on your future self, you're clear on what you're trying to accomplish, whether that's, again, do that project, do that thing the boss gave you, write that book, write that article, start that business, whatever it is, design that product. If you wake up with a clear intention and you've got a good plan for your day and you wake up having gotten a great amount of rest, at least 7 hours of high quality sleep, And again, sleep is a key aspect. All forms of recovery are a key aspect, so that when you're working, you're actually there. You're focused, you're in flow, you've set the stage, you've set the table. Then you just get to work. Get to work, and do it before. Knock out your key tasks before you look at your phone, before you send your brain into a million different directions. Most people, they wake up and within the first 6 to 8 minutes of their day, they've already opened up their email, they've opened up their social media, they've already sent their brain into 1,000 different directions, they've sped their brain from what's called the alpha state to the beta state, and so as a result, they can't focus. And then they're just distracted and non-focused throughout the whole day. And they're basically like a person walking through a casino. They're ping-ponged on all of the different distractions, and they're never in flow, they never create important work, they never do what Cal Newport calls deep work. And they don't experience flow at home or at work. They're never really with their family. They're never really recovering. They're always a little stressed. They're always feeling like a fraud, always regretful. You can only have confidence, or what psychologists call identity capital. What Stephen Covey calls having a personal bank account, which is basically confidence and integrity and character, by doing what you want to do and what you need to do, putting first things first. For example, I know on all the days when I wake up and I just distract myself on social media or something, that I feel like a failure when I go home to my kids. I feel like I wasted mine and their time. And I know I set both of us up for a less of a future. But when I go to work and I focus on first things first, I knock out my goals, then I can go home and just completely turn off. You can go on and off only if you accomplish what you were supposed to. And what you were supposed to do is fewer things. 80-20 principle says that 80% of your results come from 20% of what you do. This again is why you can save at least 20 hours per week, because you're probably doing 80% of the things that are costing you all your time and effort. 80% of what you're doing is only producing 20% of your results. So what would happen if you just removed that 80% and either delegated it, outsourced it, or removed it from your life and only focused on the few things that produce the big results? Again, you're either in the results economy or you're in the time and effort economy. So the key here is this. Wake up with a plan, go to bed with a plan, which the night before, maybe you spent 3 to 5 minutes making the plan so that you could actually wake up with a purpose. Wake up. And again, James Clear does this. James Clear wrote the book Atomic Habits. He does not look at his phone until noon. Very smart, very smart. No. And really you want to use your phone technology, which is basically other people's agendas. You want to use that as a tool. You don't want that tool to drive you. Most people are driven by that tool. So you don't have to wait until noon, but you want to eat the frog before you look at your phone. You want to accomplish your most important work, 2 to 5 hours of focused flow, and then be done. And actually, there's a lot of research that says you want to work out. A lot of people, they work out first thing in the morning, which is cool. There's a lot of research that working out speeds up your energy and it gets you going. And that if you get high intensity workout, like for example, before taking a test, you can perform better on that test. I'm all for that. But there's also a lot of research that says that you're going to work out a lot better and get way more out of it if you do it at least like a couple hours after you've woken up. And I find that the optimal morning routine is this. Wake up, get yourself into a different environment, get yourself energized, write in your journal, write about your goals, and then ultimately take action on your frog, whatever that is. 60 to 90 minutes plus whatever you can get. At least 60 minutes in flow, but if you can get 2 to 5 hours in flow, working on your number one goal. For me, it used to be writing articles. For me, now it's writing books, making videos like this. But if you do that in a flow state where there's nothing else distracting you, you haven't already opened up social media, you're not already distracted by a million things, you're just knocking out that one thing. Then ultimately you just recover. You recover, you take breaks. There's a lot of research on this topic. It's called psychological detachment from work. Basically, the idea is you need to take breaks from work. In order to be in a flow state, in order to fully engage in your work, you need to fully disengage. As I've already said in this video, the way to fully disengage is to actually have done the work. You need to actually have focused flow and done what you said you would do what you want to do, take action and actually move your projects forward so that you're becoming your desired future self. And then ultimately, because you did that, you actually can give yourself permission to fully unplug because you're in integrity. You fully unplug and then you give the energy and attention to the other areas of your life, whether that be hobbies, recreation, family, whatever you want to do. Just recover, because by recovering, you're going to actually fully recover. But what's interesting about it as well is there's a lot of research that shows 16% of creative ideas happen while you're at work. Most creative ideas happen while you're recovering. And so because you've hit it so hard, you're going to actually, while you're asleep, for example, with fitness, you actually get stronger while you're asleep. You gain muscle while you sleep. And so by taking time away, by recovering, and then by ultimately reflecting, writing in your journal at the end of the day, 5 to 10 minutes about what you learned. At the end of the day, your brain's actually a lot more analytical. In the morning, your brain's a lot more creative. But at the end of the day, you can actually take the time to write in your journal about what you learned. You're going to get all sorts of creative insights just because you've been recovering. And then ultimately, you make the plan for the one frog you're going to eat the next morning, or whatever it is, your main task, whatever's important, first things first the next morning, so that then the next morning you can wake up with a purpose. And ultimately, that's the goal. You wake up, you work on a really good brain. When your subconscious is most primed, when your willpower is most high, when your brain's most primed for creative work, you do your most important work first thing in the morning in a flow state without your brain going a million directions, and then you recover. And you become results oriented. You have very clear goals, big picture goals and short-term goals. You've got weekly goals for what you're trying to accomplish that week. You've got your daily 1 to 3 accomplishments you're trying to accomplish that day. You've got quarterly goals, and your future self is increasingly clear. If you've got clear goals, that's going to help you be in flow. If you design your life and environment really well, that's going to help you be in flow. If you recover really well, that's going to help you be in flow. If you're invested in your goals, that's going to help you be in flow. Investing in, for example, mentorship. If you have deadlines, that's going to help you be in flow. As you know, I think it's Parkinson's law that work fills the space you give it. So if you have short timelines, you'll be able to get things done. For example, this month, I'm filming this in December of 2020. I have to almost write 2 full books this month in December because I've got deadlines, but I know that I'm going to do it because there's a deadline. And so I have to be in flow because my situation demands it. That's another aspect, is designing demanding situations. That's called a forcing function. Will Durant, the famous historian, said that the ability of the average person could be doubled if the situation demanded it. A lot of research on psychology shows that, the Pygmalion effect says that we're either rising or falling to the demands of our situation. One of the reasons why I actually learned this morning routine and had to apply it is because when I was in my PhD program, my wife and I became foster parents of 3 kids. And so as a college student, I used to have all the time in the world. And when you have all the time in the world, you're going to waste it. As the saying goes, if you want to get something done, give it to a busy person, because they actually know how to spend their time. Well, once my wife and I got foster kids, after I came home from school, I had to help my wife because she was freaking busy and crazy. It was crazy having those kids in the beginning. They were crazy in the beginning. They've really transformed. It's been amazing, and we've transformed. But I had to learn this because I wanted to become a professional writer, and I learned how to do that. I learned how to become a professional writer. I've published 3 traditional books in the last 3 years. And I've got 3 more coming out next year. And I also was able to grow a 7-figure online business before I even graduated with my PhD, all by doing this. And so I can promise you it works, whatever you're trying to accomplish. But not only that, you live your life more on purpose. You have a lot of confidence because you're experiencing way more flow. You're experiencing flow at work, which gives you confidence. You're accomplishing goals, which gives you confidence. You're also experiencing flow at home because you're giving yourself permission to recover. You give yourself full permission to recover because you accomplished your 1 major task for the day, or your 2 major tasks. Because you were in such flow and because you actually accomplished a goal, you give yourself full permission to recover, and it feels good. And then you're far more alive and alert with your family. One more thing I'll just invite you to do, because willpower is a very weak resource. Relying on willpower is dumb. B.J. Fogg, the Stanford psychologist, said you're much better to design the environment than rely on willpower. So design trumps willpower every day of the week. Part of design is actually removing bad defaults. Most people, the default is to look at their phone if it's by their body. So one of the things you want to do when you're recovering is keep your phone away from your body. That's something that I've actually made clear to my kids. One of my major goals is to keep my phone away from my body when I'm home, unless it's necessary to the situation. But if I'm sitting there staring at my phone, and there's a lot of research on this as well, if parents are addicted to their cell phones, what do they expect of their kids? Kids mimic. We all mimic. You mimic what you're looking at. So whatever you focus on expands. If you want to become a millionaire, focus on millionaires. But your kids are focusing on you. And so design the situation so that flow is easy. Leave your phone in your car. Leave it in the bathroom. Leave it in some other room. Leave it in your work bag. Leave your computer at the office. Or if you're working directly from home, leave it in the area where you work, or leave it out in your car. Design the situation so that flow is easy. Give yourself permission to psychologically detach and recover from work. Wake up with a purpose. Focus on flow. After you've crushed flow-based work, then exercise, because exercise heals your brain. It heals your body. It gives you longevity. And honestly, over time, you work less and less, but you accomplish more and more. That's the morning routine that will help save you at least 20 hours per week. A big aspect of what he trains people to do is honestly journaling. And from my perspective, there's 3 key aspects of journaling for self-awareness, and then ultimately performance, and then ultimately self-creation. So the first aspect of it is self-awareness, actually becoming aware of your own self. Taking the time, using your journal as a reflection tool to look at, for example, what happened today. So if at the end of your day, you took the time to just think about your day and what went well and what didn't well, and then taking the time to assess what were maybe the factors. For example, yesterday for me wasn't necessarily the best day in terms of my performance. I actually came to work and I had a really hard time focusing. And so last night, I just took some time to journal and reflect on why didn't I have a good day? Like, what was I struggling with? And I just started to actually think about how things were going. And this allows awareness. That's one of the key aspects, is you can't actually change something unless you become aware of it. Freud said that you've got to make the unconscious conscious. And so a big aspect of journaling is just writing about what's going on, becoming aware of your thoughts, becoming aware of your feelings, becoming aware of the meanings you give to things. There's a lot of research, obviously, on how journaling can help you reframe trauma. Let's just say you have a trauma from your past, some negative or hard experience. Well, journaling about that, writing about it, and then thinking about how you feel about it, the meaning you've given to it, how it's affected you, that allows you to become aware of it. And once you become aware of it, you can ultimately change it. You can reframe it. You can change the meaning you gave to it. But you have to be aware that this is how you feel about it and how it's impacting you. There's a lot of research on the subject of what's called emotional regulation. So when you're stressed, when you're dealing with pressure, ultimately you want to write about how you're feeling, and that alone allows you to become aware of how you're feeling. It allows you to get it out in front of you, and then you can ultimately start thinking about it differently. You can choose the meanings you give to it. And so the first aspect of journaling is ultimately self-awareness, awareness of yourself, awareness of your feelings, awareness of the meanings you're giving to experiences, awareness of why you might be performing at the level you are. And I don't think that this needs to take long. I think that this aspect of journaling is probably best at night. Just taking a little bit of time, maybe 5 to 10 minutes at the end of the day, to just reflect on how that day went and maybe thinking about the factors that led to that. Why didn't I have a good day focusing yesterday? Well, I know I didn't sleep as long yesterday. I went to bed a little later than normal the night before. But what other things happened when I woke up? What were some of the things that threw me off? Just taking the time for self-awareness. The second aspect of journaling that allows you to become a student of your own self is tracking. And now this is something that a lot of people don't like to do, but if you actually start tracking your behavior or tracking your performance, you start to actually become aware of how you're doing. For example, if you started tracking how much money you spent, then you'd become aware of it. A lot of people, they don't know what's going on with their money. They don't know where it all goes because they're not tracking it. They don't have clear things that they're tracking. In order to actually track something correctly, you need to have clear goals. You have to measure something clearly. A lot of people, they don't have clear goals. They just have general goals. And if you're measuring yourself against general goals, you're never going to feel good, because general ideals or whatnot are always moving. And if you're always measuring something against a general, then you can't actually feel like you're making progress. So obviously a key aspect of tracking is, one, having measurable goals, but also then measuring various things. It's very healthy. As an example, Dan Sullivan talks about how the key to being happy is, obviously first you have to have clear measurables, clear goals you're going for, because you can actually measure how you're doing, but also measuring yourself against where you were. So taking the time to measure your progress. So that could be, for example, measuring how well you ate this week, like literally measuring your food, measuring your income, measuring how much if you're a writer, how many words you wrote. Like, taking time to measure is another powerful way of becoming aware. Once you become aware, you can then develop systems and tools and maybe get coaching or training or build goals to improve it. But if you're not aware of your own behavior, if you're not aware of your own performance, if you're not aware of your own self and your own life, then how can you be a student of yourself? You're actually literally not even sure who you are. Why would you want to go through life not knowing who you are? It's powerful to become aware of what's going on, to make the unconscious conscious, but also then to consciously focus on. There's a great concept called Pearson's Law. According to Pearson's Law, that which is measured improves. That which is measured and reported improves exponentially. So not only do you want to measure something, because when you measure it, literally almost by measuring it, it automatically improves because you're giving it attention, energy, and whatever you give attention and energy to grows. Whatever you focus on expands. And so if you're taking the time to just measure something, you're going to improve it. But if you measure and report it, if you have accountability, if you have maybe a daily accountability partner, if you have a weekly accountability group, if you're measuring and reporting your progress regularly, then your rate of improvement will grow exponentially. The first two are just general reflection. The second one is tracking. The third one, as far as using your tool to become a student of yourself, is ultimately your future self, imagining your future. Albert Einstein said that imagination is more important than knowledge. Well, the journal is one of the ultimate tools. Actually, it is the ultimate tool for self-creation. Your identity is how you see yourself. It's how you define and describe yourself. Most people are not very clear on their own identity. Your identity is the story you tell about yourself. It's your script. It's how you define and describe yourself. Most people, their identity is very past-centric, and it's also very fixed mindseted. If someone was to ask you, who are you? You'd start then to tell the story about your past. Well, what would happen if you actually had imagined out your desired future self? You want to use your journal to ultimately define out your future self, to imagine future scenarios. You got to have imagination. You got to have play. You've got to think of amazing ideals in your future, but then ultimately to imagine your future self as that person, and to really think about what that person is, and ultimately to design your identity around that future self. One of the things that Jim Lair recommends is ultimately defining a script of the type of person you want to be, so that when you're in a stressed out situation, you can use that script to remind you of the type of person you are. So for example, if you're having a really bad day and you're falling apart, maybe you could go back to your script. All right, this is the type of person I want to be. In psychology, that concept is actually called implementation intentions. It's when you start to fall apart or you get triggered or things start to get stressful, you then have a tool you turn to ultimately get you back on track. That's actually why in Alcoholics Anonymous, they have you have a sponsor. Because when you're triggered and you're getting ready to go and self-sabotage, you then have a strategy that you turn to immediately so that you don't fail and ultimately kill your confidence. So that your journal becomes your way of formulating your identity, the person you want to be. Not only do you want to be aware of your behavior and what's going on, but you want to ultimately become the designer of yourself. You want to design your identity. Your identity is the thing that drives your behavior. Your identity is based on your goals and your future, and it's based on what you give value and meaning to. You ultimately want to get really clear on what you give value and meaning to. You want to reframe the things that no longer matter, but you want to use your journal to define what matters to you, define what you care about, define what the good life is for you, and then to design your identity, the type of person you want to be. And then on a regular basis, obviously, you write in your journal about who you are, about how you're doing. You have people around you who matter, who care, who you can use to get feedback and support. You then share your new identity with other people. There's a great concept in psychology called the principle of consistency. And basically what the principle of consistency shows is that as human beings, we have an inherent need to be consistent internally with our words, our actions, and our identity. And so when you start telling people about your future self, you start telling people about the person you want to be, you then start to not only feel more compelled to be consistent with your story, you then have more social support and social accountability to live now up to the person you intend to be. So your journal is the ultimate tool for making the unconscious conscious, for becoming aware, for tracking your behavior and improving your behavior, but also for imagining and becoming your future self, for designing your identity, for emotionally regulating when things get stressful. The journal is the ultimate tool for helping you become a student of yourself. And if you're not going to be a student of yourself, then you're living an unexamined life. And the unexamined life isn't worth living. But also the opposite of that statement is true as well, that someone who's not living an amazing life isn't worth examining. Well, having a journal allows you to think of the peak experiences you want to have. It allows you to live courageously. It allows you to commit to your future self. It allows you to think of what you actually want for yourself, because what other people think about you is none of your business. And it allows you then to actually be connected to yourself so that you're running your own race. There's a great quote from Bob Marley, and he says that the moment you stop racing is the moment you win the race. A lot of people, they're not clear on who they are, and so they're running the wrong races. They're running the races of other people. They are not clear on who they are, and so they're ultimately living the values and the goals and the agendas of other people, but they're also not measuring themselves correctly, so they're not happy. They're measuring themselves against the ideals or just the results of other people, and comparison is the thief of joy. But if you start to actually become the student of yourself, then you can measure yourself correctly. Dan Sullivan, the founder of Strategic Coach, calls this measuring the gain rather than the gap. Taking the time to track and report your progress on your measurable goals. So taking the time to actually track and assess where you are right now versus where you were before. That's another very powerful thing that you could do in your journal, is ultimately reflecting on where you are right now versus where you want to be, but also where you are right now versus where you were before. That's something I literally did in my journal today, is I literally just wrote a list of my situation right now, where I'm at right now, what's going on. But then I took the time to write down what was my life like 5 years ago. It's very powerful to measure where you are right now versus where you were before. that allows you to have happiness, confidence, success, hope. That then bolsters your imagination, your excitement, and your play towards your future self. So those are the 3 key things that I recommend you use your journal for. Reflecting, generally just reflecting at the end of the day, how you were doing, what's going on, how you are feeling. 2 is tracking the specific things you're trying to improve. And then ultimately, number 3 is designing your future self, designing your identity, using your imagination to create the future experiences you want to have, and then scripting out your identity so that then you now can better explain yourself to other people, because your identity shapes your future behavior, and your future behavior ultimately becomes a feedback loop for your identity. So as you behave and act in certain ways, you're going to start to see yourself as that person. So ultimately, as you design your future self, your future identity, and then you start acting that way, it's going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy, and ultimately you're going to become the person that you want to be. That builds your confidence, your hope, your momentum towards your future self. You make or break your day before 8 a.m. You make or break your week before Wednesday. You make or break your life before age 30. So there's a lot of research that shows that how you start things creates momentum. In fact, James Clear in his book Atomic Habits has this amazing decision tree, and he shows that obviously decisions lead to other decisions. And you're probably gonna have a bad day if you start with bad decisions. If you wake up in a reactive mode, if you wake up on autopilot, if you wake up looking at your cell phone, that's a decision that ultimately leads to other decisions. And if you don't get yourself in flow, if you don't make progress first thing in the morning, you're going to be in a negative momentum. You're going to be on autopilot, meaning your subconscious is going to take over and you're just going to be the person you were yesterday. If, on the other hand, you wake up first thing in the morning with a plan and you start making good decisions, you start waking up, getting hydrated, visualize your future self, journal about your future self, maybe take action on the most important thing in your life. And by the way, there's obviously the whole idea of what's important and what's urgent. Most people, they plug themselves back into the matrix, they're staring at their smartphone, and then they just go on with what's urgent rather than focusing on what's important. The whole idea of what's important is this right here: eat the frog. This is an amazing book by Brian Tracy, but eating the frog means you do the worst thing first. You put what's important before what's urgent. If you have a goal of becoming a professional writer, you wake up and you write that book before all the urgency. If you want to get in amazing shape, you wake up and you go to the gym before the busyness of the day. If you're not putting what's important before what's urgent, then you're only living your life day to day. If you're putting what's important first, and I would say before 8 a.m., if before 8 a.m. you've taken time to pray, meditate, visualize your future self, have gratitude. And by the way, gratitude literally changes your brain. And then if you've taken action towards your future self, in a short period of time, your life will be different. In a short period of time, you'll see the world differently. In a short period of time, you'll stop justifying the low-level behaviors that are holding you hostage. You'll stop tolerating doing things that reflect your current life. Instead, if you're putting first things first, if you're putting your future self before your current conditions, if you're actually taking action towards your dreams, then by 8 a.m. you've already got so much momentum that you'll start living the rest of your days better. In fact, there's a book called Make Your Bed. And this book sold millions of copies, but it talks about how if you make your bed first thing in the morning, you've already created a mindset of winning first thing in the morning. You've already created the first win, which creates confidence. Confidence is the byproduct of recent performance. And so if you make the bed, you now feel like a winner. You now have more confidence, and that's going to lead to better and better decisions throughout the day. If you wake up first thing in the morning and you're already just backpedaling, there's that whole quote that if you lose an hour in the morning, you're going to spend the rest of your day looking for that hour. And so you make or break your life before 8 a.m. because if you haven't put first things first before 8 a.m., if you're now just busy, caught up in the urgencies, then your day is going to disappear. And there's a really powerful quote from Meredith Willson. If you spend your days waiting for tomorrow, then you'll find you have a lot of empty yesterdays. You can't just wait for tomorrow. You can't do that thing you want to do tomorrow. You've got to put what's important right now. You got to do it first thing in the morning. You got to eat that frog before 8 a.m. and then you'll feel like a winner. There's actually a lot of research by B.J. Fogg. He's a Stanford psychologist. He is probably the most preeminent psychologist on the study of habits. In fact, his research heavily influenced James Clear's book Atomic Habits. But one of the things that B.J. Fogg has found is that in order to actually build habits, you have to feel successful. Habit development is more about emotions than it is about repetition. You got to actually feel successful. You got to feel good about what you're doing. And so waking up first thing in the morning, making your bed, and you don't have to actually make your bed, but the principle is that you're actually winning. You're making progress towards what's important. That helps you to feel confident. It helps you to feel good. It helps you to feel great. And that then changes your identity. It changes your actions. It changes how you see the world. And so now transitioning that to the week, my wife and I, because of COVID, we've been homeschooling kids. Mostly my wife's been homeschooling kids. But our kids have the goal of having no work on Friday. And what they find because they've got to manage their own schedules, what they find is if they don't have a good Monday and Tuesday, then the rest of the week is hard. Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday are tough because they put themselves in that bad situation. Well, there's a book called The Defining Decade, all about all the research on how people's 20s are probably the most important decade of their life. Your personality changes more in your 20s than any other period of time. The life you set up in your 20s often creates a trajectory for the rest of your life. And what the book explains is that people who don't use their 20s well, usually they spend the rest of their life trying to make up for the stupid decisions they made in their 20s. Either they married the wrong person, they didn't set their career up for success, they got in terrible shape, whatever it was. Who you are at 30 reflects a huge amount of your trajectory. Now, let me say this straight up and clear. If you've wasted your day before 8 a.m., you can still reverse it and create a great day. If you've wasted Monday and Tuesday, you can still have a great Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And if you've wasted your life up until your 30s, you can still change. Yes, you can change, but it's difficult. You know just as much as I do that if you start something wrong, it usually goes wrong forever. And if you think about compound interest, the sooner you start something, for example, investing, if you start investing in when you're like 20 versus 30, the compound effect is enormous. And so usually if you've started late, you're going to have to work 5-10 times harder than if you just started early and created momentum. You're going to miss enormous compound benefits. And honestly, the research is clear. If you've set yourself up for failure by age 30, your trajectory is not going to be nearly as good. If you spent those 20s well, whatever that means for you, then you've almost put yourself on an automatic path towards success. If you started your morning correctly, if you started your morning putting first things first, getting wins, you've almost set yourself up for a successful day no matter what, because you put first things first. If you crush it on Monday and Tuesday and get the most important things done, you've almost guaranteed an effective week. So wherever you're at right now, you make or break your life before 8 a.m., you make or break your week before Wednesday, and you make or break your whole life before 30. Yes, you can reverse it, but the better you start, the 10x better you can finish. Now again, if you're after age 30, then don't necessarily throw in the towel. You can still make better decisions. In fact, if you're actually applying powerful principles towards your days, you can accomplish more in a few years than most people do in a decade, because most people are not actively seeking a future self. Most people are not living by intention and by design and by purpose. Most people are living by default. Most people are in subconscious mode. Most people are putting the urgent before the important. So you can actually make rapid progress even if you started late, but the point is clear. You got to start right. The faster you start right on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a yearly basis, and if possible in your life, the more compound effect you'll have, the more momentum you'll have, and the more everything will go the way you want it to. So that's my challenge for you. Start your days right. Start them with gratitude. Start them with clarifying your future self. Eat that frog first thing in the morning, and eat that frog throughout the week. If you crush the beginning of your weeks are going to progressively get better. You're going to feel confident. You're going to feel in momentum rather than always feeling behind.